I'm going to start with a little story. It's around 2025-ish. So I wake up in my forest dreamscape at 6 a.m. You notice I still have my retro clock. And then my personal robot has made me a lovely breakfast, the perfect cup of coffee. And then I check my AMP stamp for my sort of general bodily functions, check and make sure everything looks good. Everything's fine. I'm a little dehydrated, so I grab a kombucha. And apparently dye my hair and pull it into a ponytail. I ask Alexa to pull my AMW around. She detects the slightest stress in the timbre of my voice, so she recommends a quick reset. So I fire up the Mindy Pod, and I find a great new program on CloudWave, AlphaWave. 10 minutes later, I'm right as rain. I hop in my AMW. I decide that I'm going to do Santorini as my drive time landscape. And then my son, Sebastian, pops in. He actually challenges me to a game of Beat Saber. So we engage in just the tiniest bit of trash talk. He reminds me that I am slow and somewhat aged. Just no laughing at that. I remind him that I made him. I can unmake him. I literally do play this all the time. Who do you think won? You. Correct answer. So he DMs, that's no longer a direct message, that is dematerialized. And he vanishes. He, of course, immediately sends me a Venmo request for 300 Litecoin. Then my co-pilot gives me my wish list for the day, because in the future, we don't have to-do lists. I arrive at my office. I am ready to crush it. That's my office awesome view. So you may all be asking yourself this very question right now. What has this got to do with innovation? What is she talking about? What I'm talking about is I have a vision for the future, right? And that's just a snapshot. That's just my morning. This goes on because I'm thinking about it. And I'm thinking about what's important to me personally. But I'm also thinking about things like education and what the future of education looks like and the future of work. And I actually Maxim in our, I don't know how many of you were on our panel earlier, said, you know, what if we gamified life, right? So we take our off time and instead of watching Black Mirror, thinking that's going to be the future, which it is not, we spend some time thinking about what do we care about? What do our colleagues care about? What does our family care about? And what do we personally care about? So let's continue further into the future. So this is a little thing I like to call a technology tree. And one of the notable things here is I ran out of branches long before I could get all of the technology kind of crammed in here. But what this says is that, you know, for those of you looking at either your next career or your first career, and if it's in technology, there is endless opportunity. All right, interactive portion. What's the first thing you think of when you hear the term blockchain? Nobody is yelling out first.
Russian monsters.
There's always one in every group. All right, so cryptocurrency is what most people answer. You guys are too smart, but as we know, that is half the story. All right, how many of you understand the miner joke? Anybody? Anybody? I bet you do. Of course you do. So cryptocurrency is one side of it. Digital currencies. I believe the cryptocurrency's value will not be in, banking, trying to put their arms around it and just kind of, build it into the current economic construct. I believe it is going to enable the peer-to-peer economy. But then the other part of cryptocurrency, of blockchain, is that it allows us to record every single transaction, right, between companies, between two people, contracts, and records and data. VR. I think I asked this yesterday, how many people had been in a high-end headset, and it wasn't many. Okay, so virtual reality, I think of as a destination. Right, so you're going into virtual reality to learn something, do something, see something, experience something, play something. Augmented reality is the next computing platform. So everything that you're doing today on your mobile device or on your laptop, you're going to do in the future using a wearable, and it's just going to be seamlessly projected in your field of view. And AI, of course, so that also comes into machine learning. We use AI behind virtual reality. We use AI behind blockchain, autonomous vehicles, to really leverage this technology to understand that we're on the right path, right? And leveraging this amount of computing power that we cannot as humans do. So we're so concerned about artificial intelligence sort of, taking our jobs, leading the charge, and we're going to lose our lives to AI. We're only going to lose our lives to AI if we don't all open source it and then start adding code. And if you don't know how to code, encourage your kids to learn to code. And we all need to be part of the AI and the blockchain and the AR/VR revolution. All of us. Autonomous vehicles, I'm very excited about this because that AMW, the autonomous BMW, is going to give us a lot of time back. So what are we going to do with that time? Traditionally, we just fill it with more work, right? But let's leverage that time. Let's take that time back and let's use it for something valuable. And then of course, 5G is what powers all of this. It's a long way out. It's going to be a very long rollout, but it's going to allow us to have basically 3D experiences all around us all the time. So who here has heard of the AR cloud? Oh, yeah, but wait, really? Because in San Francisco, everybody raises their hand. Because in San Francisco, everyone knows everything about technology. So the AR cloud is essentially, you're welcome for this image, a digital twin of the entire world. And so why do we need that? So I have a very good friend, his name is Charlie Fink. He writes for Forbes, and he wrote an article called "The World Will Be Painted with Data." And I think that's actually a great title. I think it's very evocative of how our sort of digital lives will be in the future. So we're going to have the real world, we're going to have the digital twin, and then we're going to have layers of data on top of that. And that's going to be endless. There's going to be entertainment, we'll have our personal data. And so we're going to have to build a mechanism to make sure that we're getting the right data at the right time in the right place. So location is one big data point, right, that's around this. So if you think of the next generation of geofencing, it's volumetric geofencing. And what that does is it adds another layer of context. So again, we're making sure that when you are in a place and you need information, that we're able to deliver it to you. So in the future, all around us. In this room, there might be 2,000, there might be 20,000 pieces of digital information, right? It could be data, it could be BIM data around this building, which we don't want to see. But there could be graffiti that maybe we do want to see. There could be art. There could be recommendations for things to do in the next room, and you could like go to Google, really it's better. LiDAR, anybody? All right, there we go. Another enabler for autonomous vehicles, right? Very important technology. So one of the companies that we work with are using LiDAR, but they've patented a combination of AI and LiDAR that allows effectively a car to see in the same way that a human does, because we sort of throw away data that's not important and then we look for anomalies in our field of view, and that's how we, in theory, drive safely when we're not texting, which is never. But that data that they're throwing away has incredible value, because the AR cloud, even if it's a digital twin, so it's every static object that we know, so it's all the buildings, the sidewalks, the trees, the signs, but they don't always stay the same. So we can use that data that they're throwing away because it's not relevant to what they're trying to accomplish, but we can use it to true up the AR cloud, right? Somebody hit a stop sign, it's no longer like this, it's like this. And we also know that they kept driving. But you see, now you start to see, it's like these are the things that we need to start doing, all of us, is connecting these dots, right? They're not going to connect themselves. We have to start thinking about what the future looks like, and that starts from sort of this sort of personal place, right? And that's where true innovation comes, sort of by looking at that landscape, figuring out, you know, find your true north, and then work towards that. And then human-centric identity, it's you know, a big concept. It's going to be a bigger piece of technology. So in the future, we're going to have our avatars, right? And they're going to be our digital representatives in the digital landscape. And so we're going to have kind of what we do now is sort of single sign-on, but we'll have a public persona, right? It's going to be all of our Instagram feeds and our Snap and our Facebook, living our best Facebook lives. And then as we start to record ourselves in these 3D environments, we're gonna leave these droplets of history, of how we've experienced a place. We're gonna leave it here. And our friends can discover it, or we can leave it open to the public. But the important piece is on the other side. It's the private data, right? We're all whining about how Facebook and Google take our information. But we gave them our information. And I don't think we have any idea what it's going to take to control it. So, does anyone here want to build $1 billion company? Build the UI to manage our data. Simple interface, right? So, you go online, you have your dashboard, your lab has pinged you because your doctor sent you there. So you release only the 3 things they've asked for, that's all they need. So it doesn't live on their servers for any length of time, right? So it takes the onus also of protecting your data off of the multitudes of companies that have them, and then it's responsible, you're responsible for it, but it lives on the blockchain. These are all theoretically unhackable. We'll see how long that lasts. But you start to see that the importance of, again, connecting these dots. So here we have, you know, avatars, virtual environments, blockchain, data, right? It's connecting dots. So innovation today is like throwing round dice without numbers. Which, in actual fact, round dice without numbers are marbles. These looked cooler. They do the same thing though, they kind of roll around looking cool, not really doing anything. Right? This is what our innovation departments are doing today. Or they get their budgets taken away from them. Or they just buy a whole bunch of toys. And they're just playing with a whole bunch of toys all day. And you were smiling because you've seen this happen. So how do we innovate innovation? So we've heard a few times with some of the talks about design thinking. right? And design thinking is a very effective way to innovate, right? And following these steps can lead to great innovation, to great products, and to really moving companies forward. But can anyone tell me where we fall down in this process?
Government control.
But which step along the way?
Oh, I think it's throughout the timeline, because what that takes away is your freedom. And it actually, take it as a good example, take what's going on in China right now in their cameras in terms of trying to identify where other people are at any point in time. That's a negative side to what you're talking about here.
No, I understand that's on more of a global level. I'm talking about sort of the practicality within sort of an innovation construct. So a group sort of charged with innovation, and the global view is the next challenge. We're going to touch on that a tiny bit.
That'd be good.
But I'm just telling you the answer. It's in the creation phase, because I mean, is there really anything wrong with design thinking now? Is anyone sort of using that sort of construct? And it's effective, right? So there's really nothing wrong with it, except that we're kind of turning it into this sort of formulaic construct, right? And then rigidity stifles creativity, right? There's nothing exciting coming out of that arm, right? As soon as we turn it into a formula, then we stop allowing ourselves to be creative and be volumetric thinkers. And it's not thinking outside the box, it's thinking around the edges of the sphere, and above the sphere, below the sphere, and through the sphere. And so it's really the convergence of all of these technologies that are going to make the solutions of the future. And so we're all alchemists, right? So learn what you can. You don't have to learn all of them. It's impossible, right? But learn enough to be dangerous. So IoT is no longer IoT. It's IoE. It's the Internet of Everything. All of the machines are going to be talking to each other. We're going to be talking to all of the machines. We are eventually going to be becoming part machine. I'm okay with it. Big data is no longer big data. Massive data. What are we going to do with all of that data? We also are going to start to learn to think in 3D. It's ironic that we live in a 3D environment, and yet we still think in terms of 2D and screens. Right? We're going to start to leverage the Z-axis. We're going to work with data from the inside out. It's all manner of data, right? It's numbers, medical data. Medical data is already. Medical scans are 3D. And yet physicians have been working with them in 2D forever. Spatial computing is coming. This is actually sort of a slightly nightmarish version. It's called Hyperverse. But this is if we had all of these experiences always on, this is kind of what this AR cloud enables, right? But we're going to, in the same way we develop filters now for the web, right? When we're surfing, if we don't want to see something, we block it, we don't accept cookies. But this is what every single surface is going to look like. There's going to be layers and layers and layers of data, and how do we sort of manage it, right? These are the things that you can spend your time thinking about. And then we're going to be able to live aspirational versions of ourselves in VR. And again, we get asked all the time, people are going to be spending hours and days in virtual reality because their lives in VR are so good they're not going to want to go back to their regular lives. Is that bad? It just is, right? It's a philosophical question. You can't necessarily answer that, but there's in short order, maybe 3 generations from now, they're going to know nothing but this, right? So it's not going to be bad for them. It's just going to be different than what we had. Everything is shared now. That becomes exponentially so, right? We're all living out loud. So storytelling in the future will also be volumetric. You probably see when you see Maxim's first real virtual story, he's going to create a world. and you're going to drop into that world. So imagine the entire series of Game of Thrones, and you just go in and you explore, right? So the director will leave you breadcrumbs, right? So you can follow the director's path. But if you decide to go over the wall and then go back and see what Cersei's doing, you can do that. Then you can record that entire version and exploration that you did, and you can share that. And your friends can then go see the way you chose to see it, and they can show you theirs. So how do we get there from here? So I don't typically like to show other people's videos in this, but this is a woman who I follow very closely. Her name is Helen Langer, and she was the first tenured Harvard psych professor, and she's absolutely brilliant. So I'm gonna let this speak for itself. And this is interactive, so when she asks the questions, play along.
All right, what I want you to do is play along with me, because then you'll get a better sense of what I'm going to try to show you. So the first thing is, what is this? Now those of you who don't see the cab, don't worry. The others only see it because somebody previously told it to them. Right. This is the way the world starts off for us. We have no idea what it is. Then somebody labels it. Now the problem is that once it's labeled, we're no longer able to see it in any other way. And that's the way we learn about most things, who we are, what we can do, what the world consists of. We can meet back here in 10 years. It'll cost you more bagels, Andrew. And I'll show you the slide again, and you'll see it's impossible not to see the cow. Let's play some more. Add these numbers with me.
All right, everybody in.
1,000, 1,040, 2,040, 2,070, 3,070, 3,090, 4,090. Okay, now I want to do this one more time. I want you to add 4,090, and to that add 10. Okay. The argument that I'm going to be making in half or less 40 years is that most of us are mindless virtually all the time. So I don't understand the intern who spoke about soon we may be living with robots. I think that most of us already are. Okay, I'll give you a simpler one. Tell me how much is 1 and 1? Now, when I start with this, people usually go, oh no, we're gonna have to listen to this for a long time, that it's so ridiculous. But it turns out 1 and 1 is 2 only some of the time. 1 and 1 is 2 if you're using the base 10 number system. If you're using the base 2 number system, 1 and 1 is depicted as 10. Easier to understand. You take 1 watt of chewing gum. You add it to 1 watt of chewing gum. 1 plus 1 is 1. So I want to argue that almost all that we think we know is wrong in at least some context. But we'll go further. Do you know David Copperfield, the famous magician? Okay, what he wants is for you to pick one of these 6 cards. Everybody picked a card? Now, for this to work, you have to look right in his eyes. Okay, and he makes sure he doesn't know you, but he's going to tell you which card you selected. Look, your card is gone. Now, for how many of you is your card gone? Yes, you see, I'll have to talk later to the rest of you who wouldn't raise your hands. And the reason for that is every card is different.
So the reason I love her and I love her work is she talks about mindfulness and very much science-backed, and she's been researching this for decades. But it's, you know, we've forgotten how to think. Right? We are just kind of on this hamster wheel, and we're just moving forward, and we're just taking what we know for granted, and we just assume that things aren't changing all around us. But things are changing. It's so fast that we have to take a moment and start retraining our brains. And it's like, you know, when people talk about mindfulness, it's not just about being a better person or more in tune. It's about giving yourself the time and space to just be open and be aware of what's around you and not be walking around like a robot like she suggests. So practical tips, right? All of this has been very sort of in the ether, so we'll bring it back down to earth, and we'll come up with some practical solutions to really bring innovation into your life, whether it's for your company, whether it's for you personally. So the recipe. So live outside the org, rethink thinking, and as we've just discussed, collaborate and inspire, understand need versus want, start at your destination, add a little bit of luck. So live outside the org. What does that mean? It means that you need to find a group of people. Actually, Bran mentioned this yesterday, right? It's like engineers and creative people. And I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. We like to label everybody as being left brain or right brain, but that's just not true. It's just how we've been led or how we've been labeled or what our belief system is. But we're all capable of both, right? Different levels, but we're all capable of both. And innovation in a corporate construct is expensive, right? So you need the investment of the company, and you need runway, you need time. And most importantly, you need cover. And you need cover directly from the CEO. You do not report to the CFO, do not report to procurement, you do not report to legal. You are your own entity, and you build whatever you want, but build. Right? Bran said yesterday, you're not meant to fail. You can misstep, but it's really meant to truly experiment, but put products out there, or services, or improvements, and iterate, and get it in front of people, right? And understand how your users are interacting with the product. That's how you're going to move forward. Right? You have to think about what problems you're trying to solve and who the user is. And it's not always about a problem. Right? No one was asking Steve Jobs to give them the iPhone. Right? We had no idea. But the only way that people like Steve Jobs can think of that is because they're clearing their minds and they're thinking, what does the future look like? What does it really look like for me, for my colleagues, for my family, for my children? Right? And that takes training. That's like, yoga for the mind, right? You have to do it. I don't suggest downward dog for the mind. I don't even know what that looks like. Terrible. Ask the hard questions, right? Talk to each other. What do you guys care about? We talk about this dystopian future, right? But it doesn't have to be so. Think about what the utopian future looks like and build to that end. Collaborate and inspire. Find your people, right? You're my people. We both ride a unicycle, right? You are my people. Find your people and inspire each other. Storytelling has also been a theme here. Several talks. Storytelling, I can't stress enough, is valuable in every aspect of your life. It is the way we communicate, and it is just as valuable in business as it is in your personal relationships. Not storytelling like fibbing, just real stories. Understand want versus need. It's a big challenge for a lot of us. And it's okay to build for what you want, but make sure that it addresses the needs of all of us in the future. And that's how we're going to start to come up with a really exciting vision of the future. Like, I really like my 2025 morning. I think it's great, right? Do all of you have that? Do all of you have some kind of a vision of what you'd like to be doing then? Or 10 years from now, or 15 years from now? I am plugging into the mainframe day one, as soon as that's available, right? But not everyone wants to do that. So what does your vision look like? And find your people, and build it. And work backwards from the future. Anyone get my reference? The reference? No, it's true. It's saying, where do you want to go? Right? So we're, especially in the kind of big corporate culture, it's like, okay, we need technology, like blockchain's a new thing. It's AI, we need VR, we need AR. Why? For what? Right? What does the future of work look like? All right, then what technology would suit that? Okay, so you're starting where you want to be, and then come back and leverage all of these great tools and technologies that we have at our fingertips. Luck is a big part of this, I'm not gonna lie. But if we all engage in this, we all win, right? We all have to be part of this story. We all have to write the story of the future, right? So what is the future of all of these things? Have you thought about any one of these things? For you personally, or your company, or your family? And if not you, who? We don't get to whine about governments unless we get in the game. We don't get to whine about our data if we're giving it away freely. We have the capacity now to galvanize and completely take over our lives and our future lives. I think it's personally, for me, it's education. We need to overhaul education, right? So what is the future of us? And then the big question. You've already given me some ideas, right? What could go wrong? The rise of the machines. So if you're doing a job right now, and you can be replaced by a robot, and you are replaced by a robot, I think you should say thank you. Because we're not meant to be doing these rote, boring activities, right? What defines value for us? So in the future, humanity is our currency. All of the things that we are born with and that we systematically train out of our kids and ourselves, right? You used to be able to sing when you were young, you used to be able to paint and dance. You used to be able to lie on the floor of Target and scream and have a tantrum until someone gave you a popsicle. Where'd those days go? But the point is, those things are going to have value, right? We're not going to be able to train AI to create beauty and art, right? That is in our DNA. We need to get back to that. I don't know where that's going to lead. This doesn't mean that we're all just going to be sitting around, painting and eating popcorn all day. But we are creative beings, and we lose touch with that by the time we hit about 12. Right? And that's a tragedy. So if we get back there, I think that will unlock a whole realm of answers. So we're here now. So life imitates art, tech imitates life, or tech imitates art. I don't know, one of those two. Well, so the interesting thing is, how many of you have seen Ready Player One and The Matrix and Iron Man? I would say that the people who are writing these books and making films about the future, when a director makes a film about the future that resonates with us, it makes sense, right? We can draw a line from here to there. I would argue that we collectively then put ourselves on the path to that future. So what if, through changing education and getting back to our creative roots, what if we were all engaged in that activity? And we were all, instead of sitting around watching Black Mirror, we were writing the story of the future. That is not a dystopian future, because I'm fundamentally just disagree that we're all going to come to ruin at the hands of technology. But there are going to be many, many challenges. And I'm so mad that Brand said this yesterday, and I attribute it to Abraham Lincoln. So I'm going to leave you with 3 thoughts. The best way to predict the future is to create it, and it doesn't matter who said it. I think this holds true. Get in the game. It is all of our responsibilities. There actually are a lot of very dangerous aspects to all of this technology, right? So if you're young enough to learn to code, which is all of you, because you have a pulse, get in the game. Contribute to open source AI, contribute to blockchain, help build the architecture, or write the story. Everyone in this room is capable of at least one of those things, if not all. Don't ask permission to lead. That's in your life, in your company. You'd be surprised. People are nervous about, taking the leap. Roll up your sleeves. Don't be obnoxious about it, but roll up your sleeves and get in. Most importantly, think outside the cow. Thank you. Are we doing time for
We're doing
questions?
great on
Did
time,
I waffle
honestly.
too
Yeah.
long?
No, you're perfect. So if we have some Q&A, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay with that. Questions up front?
Yes.
Do we need a microphone in here?
I don't know. It might help. It might help since it's being recorded.
Okay, for the purpose of the recording. I agree with the vision. I think actually you've got one of the statements in my mind backwards. These days, life imitates art more than the other way around, because almost all the cool devices that I've seen come out of tech in the last 15 years were on the movie screen 5 to 10 years before that. And then somebody in the design shop said, I could make that. But the process of the innovation is actually coming from people who have no tech background, and then the things that don't involve hoverboards, real hoverboards, actually show up a few years later. So I love to encourage it, but I think it's actually backwards right now.
Well,
because we're not thinking about it.
I just said it backwards because I think we're aligned. Art imitates life, tech imitates art. So you think it's the other way around?
I think
Art imitates tech?
all the way back to the Minority Report glove showing up in Microsoft a year and a half later, to the glasses that the Iron Man's designing with. All these things are showing up in the design shops a few years after they show up in movies the first time.
Well,
I love the-
that is what I'm saying. I think we're just saying the same, two sides of the same coin. But that is what I mean. It's like the people who like Ready Player One, for example, is showing this kind of dystopian vision of what our virtual lives are going to be like. And so, now that's kind of ingrained in our collective consciousness. However many millions of people see that film, that becomes their truth. And I believe that goes all the way back to education, right? Where we label kids, we say that they have social disorders. I would argue that all of us have social disorders. I mean, we do, right? Something, right? We're either shy or we're overbearing, and you can guess which one I am. But it's like, kids wear those for their lives. Like, you wear those labels, and I think we just need to start challenging the way we think about everything, and especially education, because what if, instead of trying to push kids into this very linear way of thinking, we build those same worlds that we're going to have for entertainment, but we build those for education and discovery, and we build curriculum into worlds of discovery that allow children to then find the things that are interesting to them, and then there's infinite drill down. Then you add a global collaboration layer where the classrooms are truly global, right? Where they experience children from all over the world. They get to experience children's cultures from all over the world without the politics. Politics comes later, we'll solve that later. But we need a generation who are empowered and not told all of the things they can't do from day one. And I think it'd be very interesting to see what that first generation, they'll come out swinging. It'll be very interesting to see the kinds of problems that they're able to solve.
One quick tiny follow-up.
Yeah.
I think there's another thing that's a missing enabler that we need to figure out how to design. Is another killer app for the community to figure out. Right now, the thing that's missing in making this happen for some of these big data entities is attribution on the objects, figuring out how to tie them to the world. So if you can come up with a crowdsourced way of being out there and crawling the data at the AR real happens. I've been calling it Wiki 3D for lack of any other term. But that would
to give it some stickiness. So actually there's a company I'm working with that's using network protocols to do that, and to actually tie data to the real world using IP addresses. So it's traditional network protocols. They haven't reinvented the wheel, but they have a block of IPv6. So every single millimeter on the planet has an IPv6 address, and you can append almost infinite mobile behaviors and in a hierarchical structure. So actually, I can even show you, because I did, this slide is actually about that company, but I took the company name out. But you can see some of the, and they actually have a gtld.place. Oh, where is it? It's way back. But yeah, they're doing some interesting work, and that's actually one of the things when we work with big companies are getting bigger and bigger blind spots. It's this one. So it's a spatial registry, and they have rule management, and that management is in a hierarchical structure, again, that follows network protocols. government, boom, 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 all the way down the line. And wherever your relationship is to that place, then there's a standard for where you fall in that hierarchical rule structure. But yeah, that's how you tie it to the digital twin.
Hi, this is Kyujo. I have one quick question for you. It's very impressive. You mentioned almost everything. Person who want to create something. How about creator must be seriously consider about responsibility. Like this AI, ML, all this thing currently immature. So people actually don't have any, so what the consequence could be, not much. However, human nature was, social scientists said, through which we used to do every day, it become our habit, easy to do. So no resistance about this one. So recently there was an AI machine actually hacked by a bad guy, and the owner of that machine now become fear or something. Oh, this is not what I want. So losing controllability very easily. So we should consider responsibility as one of the important feature for the creator, even engineers or scientists. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's obviously that's an important point, and that's sort of under the what could go wrong bucket. So, when you look at virtual reality, that's an empathy machine. So part of, my vision, and again, because I think about this a lot, I'm not saying that I'm right. What I'm saying is I think about it a lot, and I want to find other people. It's how Maxim and I became friends. We have conversations that are 50 years in the future, and who knows if we're right. But I think it's important to have this conversation so we can talk about these things. So, having everybody take a step forward, we're not going to solve all the problems at once. And I think we have to start at this sort of generational level where we give tools to the next generation and the generation behind them, and create educational constructs where we breed empathy, right? Where kids who supposedly have social disorders can go into virtual reality and practice so-called correct social behaviors so they can be successful outside. But then on the other side, those who have different social issues can go in and see what it's like to be ostracized for whatever issue they might have. And if we can create a generation of people who are really truly thinking about others and also thinking about a global community, right? So really thinking about community in concentric circles, right? So you have yourself, your family, your community, your immediate community, your country, the world, and soon the space station, right? So you have empathy, and you can draw a line all the way out to the greater good. And we have to start hard coding that in. And if we leave AI to the kind of strangely sweaty, ironic t-shirt, goateed people that are currently coding it, we're gonna have a problem, right? So, and we need to make it open source. And then we need to have a mechanism through blockchain of verifying what sticks and what doesn't, and what needs to go back to the shop, and then we all work on it, right? And this is a utopian vision. I'm not saying this is gonna be easy, but I agree with you, but part of it is having this dialogue, right? And hopefully you go away and think, all right, maybe actually we can do this. And then I'll go away and think, all right, how do we solve some of this problem of responsibility, right?
Cool. So my question to you is, in your utopia, can AI lead humans, or do you think humans will still lead AIs?
Well, I think it's going to be in parallel. I mean, I do believe that we are going to merge with machines to a certain degree, which means that there is going to be a component to us that has this high-level AI capability. It's how we wield it, right? And it's how it's like everything. Like the battle of good versus evil wages on, right? We're always going to have that challenge. But we've also sort of bred this resistance to change, right? We liked this sort of notion of stasis, right? Because change represents the unknown. So the value I see in AI, and even integrated into our kind of brain thought and process, is that I think we're going to be a little bit smarter and a little less afraid of change, because we can have some other control mechanisms. Someone will invent ways for us to see into the future, perhaps. So maybe then we won't be so afraid of it.
I think so. It's like artificial evolution.
Well, there you go. Well, you're right, actually, because remember we were talking last night about technology far outpaces natural selection now. It's not even in the ballpark. So we're going to have to replace that using technology, right? And so hopefully we'll find a good way to merge those two. But there's going to be shrapnel between now and then. Oh.
Thanks for the great talk. So my question is that you mentioned the innovation reports directly to the CEO. So what do you think of sourcing these innovative tasks to maybe university researchers compared to doing it directly in the company?
Oh, you just mean innovation within a university versus innovation within a company?
Yes.
Well, innovation within a university is a sort of a different construct entirely. Then it's about finding a professor who has a research project, or where you bring a research project to a professor and put a team together. So that comes under sort of a different realm, and even if you're not able to find a professor, that doesn't necessarily mean the idea isn't valid. It's like they can only do so many research projects. But I still recommend getting a group of students together, because if you get a little bit of traction, someone's going to pay attention, right? So either you spin it out into a company, or maybe another professor hears about it and wants to sponsor you and get involved. And it really just depends on what type of innovation you're doing. And then in the company construct, I mean, I work with so many R&D teams, and the challenge they have is that they'll 1 year they're flush, and then the market tanks, and then the stock drops, and then they get their funds taken. And a lot of you are programmers. You know what it's like if you get yanked out of coding. You don't just flip a switch and you're back in, right? It takes you a while to kind of get back into the groove. It's the same thing with innovation on a larger scale. If you bring it to a screeching halt, they're not going to be able to just pick it up again 6 months later, right? It has to be a consistent process. So it's hard to do, but CEOs are starting to actually really allow some of these companies, and they're even moving physically the R&D teams and the innovation hubs outside of the company, and just giving them their budget, and then it's untouchable. And I think that is the very first step. That's not all, but that's the first step in really, truly innovating in a corporate environment.
Yeah, I brought up the concern. I actually have thought a lot about this issue. I think it's an important one. It provides an ability to learn. I have an autistic grandson. Something like this is perfect for him. But then you start talking about a large picture, you start talking about philosophical views of how society should operate, and then you start talking about how you want to control your society, and how you want the society to, say, serve for the common good, which isn't necessarily in the best interest of society. The comment was made yesterday that we will control our own evolution, and I think that's a true statement, but it's also a very dangerous statement. And so how do we control this? How it goes from what presents the good? What presents? How do you protect yourself from the bad?
Well, again, I don't think it's a black and white answer. There's like I said, the battle of good versus evil will rage on. There's always going to be people trying to hack into systems, and again, I'm not saying that I have all the answers. You have answers. Maxim has answers. Kendall has answers. But having this dialogue is just like a minuscule step in where I think we need to go. And I think where we have influence is in our field of view, and influence your immediate vicinity. So if your grandson has autism, you know, go to, what is the organization, the National Autism Organization? I forget the name of it.
There's several.
There's several, but you know, go to one of those and say, are you guys have you seen the studies for virtual reality and how it can improve social interactions in childhood? Because a lot of the sort of negativity and that really does tip the balance in the war of good versus evil, I believe, comes from our childhood. And we're carrying things that we're not even aware of that cause us to behave in a certain way. If we can even just shift that to an incremental degree, you know, it's a butterfly wing effect, right? I mean, who knows what the next generation can be if you know, your grandchild has 25 less negative interactions, right? How will that impact his life?
We have time for one more good question.
Okay, make it a good one.
I'll go here.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. I'm not at all a technophobe, but I do have but one question, which is sort of a devil's advocate question I was going to ask, is that I've heard several times before the idea that when all this happens, computers cannot be creative, we'll all just be creative. As far as I can tell, that's purely a religion, basically, of the tech world, that computers will never be creative in some way. And why would we believe that?
Well, I don't think in the short term. I think that where I'm saying that you know, we're going to leverage our creativity is in the transition between now and when we really merge with machines. We'll be able to, I mean, who knows what the AI of the future will be able to do. And we will be, they're certainly self-sustaining, self-training, self-improving. So yeah, in theory, in the future, we will be able to train them to be creative, but they're only going to be as creative as we are. And there's an entire new kind of, you know, economic construct that's going to occur within these digital worlds, where the cryptocurrency is going to enable these peer-to-peer transactions. So if you think of, you know, just in-app purchases, for example, think about how many millions of dollars people are, billions of dollars, people are spending on digital goods that don't exist. So that is going to increase dramatically. So Second Life had its sort of first coming, and you saw a lot of economies build from that. It's going to be modeled somewhat after that. So that's where the creativity comes from. What are we going to be doing in this digital landscape? And people will make money in this digital landscape.
But why do you think that, say, creativity computers only be as creative as we make them? I mean, I could certainly see in the future that creative jobs will be taken over by computers as well.
That's possible. I'm talking the evolution between here and there. We've seen that, you know, we can train you know, computers to play music, right? But you put people in a room and they can tell the difference between a live artist and a computer, because we've missed the organic piece. So we have to go back to kind of understanding ourselves and our own creativity first before we have the ability to hard code it into AI. I didn't answer your question.
Well, yeah, it was just eventually, presumably, they get advanced enough that we can't tell the difference between.
Eventually, we're going to be merged, and they are going to be us. So we'll just be that much more creative.
I mean, everyone can be Amy Peck.